Alright guys, welcome back to Queens of the Damned, a horror podcast. This week we are talking about horror comedies. So we start off with a more recent horror comedy, and we jump back to an older one from, I believe, the 80s, and then we kind of middle out in the 2000s. Hope you guys enjoy. So I chose Happy Death Day for my movie this week, because I love this movie. I've seen it like 100 times. I feel like I talk about it all the time. Did you guys ever see Happy Death Day?
Yes.
By the way? Yes? Okay. I love this movie so much. Okay, so Happy Death Day is just pretty much, it's just a modern comedy slasher film, and it follows a college student, her name's Tree, who is murdered by a masked killer on the night of her birthday when she's going to a party. But instead of staying dead, she wakes up in the morning on her birthday again. So after the same day being killed once again by the baby-faced killer, literally, because he wears a baby mask, she catches on to what's been happening, and she determines that the only way to stop her coming back the next morning is to kill the killer before they can get to her. So basically this is just Groundhog's Day, except it's a comedy and it's a slasher film. So she spends a lot of time trying to figure out who would even want to kill her, and there's this long sequence in the movie where you just see her dying over and over again as she's trying to, like, she's watching all of these people, and she keeps dying in these really creative ways, and the next day she wakes up, like, in some kind of weird pain by how she died. Like, she hangs herself one time, so she wakes up with, like, neck pain and stuff like that. But after she figures out who her killer is, Tree hunts him down. So she finds out that the man who was responsible for her mother's death was being held in a local hospital in her town. So she determines that he has to be the killer, because it makes too much sense. So she tracks him down and she tries to kill him, but one of her friends that she made throughout her little, like, time-jumping journey was killed while she was trying to kill her killer. So she is then forced to kill herself and go back in time once again, because if people die before the killer dies, then they stay dead. But if she goes back, she still gets an opportunity to make everything perfect. So by the end of the movie, you see Tree as a completely different person when she is making what she believes to be her last trip back in time, basically to stop this killer. She's completely different from who we saw in the beginning. She's a much kinder person, more understanding, and as she's on her way to stop her killer, she is helping people. So she eventually tracks him down, she kills him, and she heads back to her dorm and goes to bed. But to her surprise, she wakes up again on her birthday. And she then has to determine who the real killer is, if it's not the man that she originally thought it had to be. I'm going to give a spoiler here, so if you haven't seen the movie, then you might want to skip ahead, just because the twist in this movie is really great, and I honestly didn't see it coming. I don't know if other people did, but I really liked it. I thought it was really cool. But Tree retraces her birthday to figure out who her real killer is. So her day pretty much starts out... Well, I guess it doesn't start out. When she gets back to her dorm, her roommate, the first thing she does is gives her a cupcake for her birthday. But every morning, Tree throws it away because she doesn't want the cupcake. She throws it away every day. But the day that she thought that she was going to be ending this cycle, she ate the cupcake. And her roommate is also a nurse who works at the hospital that her original killer was being held at. She determines that her roommate freed the killer when Tree refused to eat the cupcake. That way, Tree would definitely die, no matter what happened. And her roommate reveals the reason for this was because Tree was sleeping with one of her professors, and that professor is somebody that her roommate was supposedly in love with. And Tree basically kicks her roommate out the window, and the loop is broken. And then Happy Death Day to You comes out, and it's also really great, and even funnier than the first one. But I didn't want to talk about the second one, because there's a lot going on in the second one. But the second one is, like, amplifies the camp by a lot. Like, a lot of people didn't like it because they were like, this isn't even a horror movie anymore. But it's just supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I don't know. I loved this movie. I thought it was so different from a lot of the stuff we see right now in horror, and it's a different kind of horror comedy to me, too, again, compared to the stuff that we've been seeing most recently, I guess. I liked it a lot. What did you guys think of it?
I thought it was a really self-aware film, which I think is the best in comedy. Like, it shouldn't be unintentional, of course, but, like...
No, I agree. I think that it was very self-aware. And yeah, I really loved it, and I liked the second one a lot, too.
Yeah.
And it was definitely one where, when they announced a sequel, I was like, but the first one ended so perfectly. Why do we need it? But then I really ended up liking it, so.
I was actually really excited when they announced the sequel, because I loved the first one so much.
Yeah, my thing with the sequel is that sometimes I think they make a sequel just because something is a hit. Actually, a lot of the time they make a sequel, and it doesn't really need one. Like, if something like this that's really clever the first time around, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it loses its cleverness by having a sequel. But this one did not, because they went kind of in a different direction, like you said, with the sequel. But I really loved the original, and I didn't really know what to expect. I think I watched it on Netflix.
Is it on Netflix?
It was for a while. I don't know if it's still there.
Oh, okay.
But it kept coming up on my, like, things we think you'd enjoy on Netflix. So finally I watched it, kind of thinking, oh, I've never even heard of this. It's probably really shitty. And then I loved it. So what do you know?
I've talked about this in previous episodes, but I actually got the first one spoiled by the trailer for the second one. And I still enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah,
I still enjoyed the first one. I still was trying to figure out how was her roommate doing it. You know, what was her intention from the beginning, so it was still pretty interesting to me. Yeah,
and I did not figure out the twist or who the real killer was. I kind of figured that the guy she thought was the killer was not the real killer.
Yeah.
But I did not figure out who it really was. So, yeah, I think that it was well done, and it was a good twist. It wasn't a twist just to have a twist.
Right.
Yeah, it was well done.
I agree. It was a very good movie.
And the acting was good. Sometimes in horror comedies, the acting's really shitty, but the acting was very good.
Yeah. Well, and the main actress, I don't even know her name. This had to have been one of her first things that she's done, right?
I've never seen her. I know her name is Jessica something, but I've never seen her in anything else. Let me look her up. Let's see. Jessica Roth. The only other thing I've ever seen her in is La La Land, and then she was like barely in that. But I've never seen her in anything else. It looks like she's been in quite a bit, but mostly like one episode of a TV show. Right? It looks like this was kind of like her first major leading role.
Yeah.
Because she's like barely in La La Land. She's one of Emma Stone's friends.
Yeah. I haven't seen anything she's in.
I hope that these movies get her more into the horror community, I guess, or, you know, get her more into more horror movies, because I thought she did a great job.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I don't think we're gonna have a lot of deep analytical things to say about on this
really
episode.
Not,
it's horror comedy week.
Yeah,
exactly. And some horror comedies are really deep, but not the one that I picked either.
Me neither.
So I chose Fright Night. I picked the original from 1985. The less said about the remake, the better. So this movie, I'm not going to go into like the whole plot because I started to write it out and it's really complicated. Shockingly, like if you try and explain the whole plot, it's actually sounds complicated. But the basic premise is it's about this 17-year-old boy named Charlie Brewster. He's a big horror fan and he loves this nightly horror TV show called Fright Night. which is hosted by this former movie star who played a vampire hunter in movies named Peter Vincent. So Charlie begins to suspect that his neighbor, Jerry, is a vampire and ends up turning to Peter Vincent for help in defeating him. So this movie stars William Ragsdale as Charlie, Roddy McDowall, an amazing performance as Peter Vincent, and then Chris Sarandon in an all-time great performance as Jerry, the vampire. The performances in this movie are, like, top-notch.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Top-notch. Yes, and it's, like, picture-perfect casting for every single role. Like, no role is badly cast. Everyone is just perfect in their parts. Like, you can't really imagine anyone else playing these roles. So, this movie was written and directed by Tom Holland in his directorial debut. And he was inspired to do this movie when he came up with an idea about what a teenage boy would do if he thought his neighbor was a vampire. And his first thought is, well, he would turn to Vincent Price, right? The most legendary horror actor of all time, you know, my main squeeze, Vincent. So, Tom Holland, the director, he was also a big fan of locally syndicated horror hosts like Svengoolie, Ghoulardi, and Elvira. So he also decided that obviously the boy would turn to a TV host, right? Because who else would he know to turn to? So, the character of Peter Vincent was obviously inspired by Vincent Price. He actually wrote the part specifically for Vincent Price, but at that time he was no longer accepting roles in horror movies due to extreme typecasting. So he named the character Peter Vincent after Vincent Price, obviously, and then the first name is named after Peter Cushing, who's another really legendary horror actor. So they were having a hard time casting the role of Peter Vincent, and until the head of Columbia Pictures suggested Roddy McDowall for the part. And then he and Holland ended up forming a lifelong friendship, which resulted in Roddy McDowall actually introducing Holland to Vincent Price at a dinner party. And so this is this really big deal for Holland because Vincent Price was his idol, you know, growing up. And Vincent Price told him that he was so flattered that the role was written specifically for him, and he said that he saw the movie and he really loved it and thought that it was just perfect. And he even said that he was glad that he didn't play the part because Roddy McDowall was so good in it. He didn't think he could have been any better. So, you know, he was just like an amazing guy, as we've all discussed. He was so giving. Ugh, I just love him, you guys. He's like the one celebrity that has never let me down. Every time I hear a story about him, I'm like, it's a great story. He's still a nice guy. It's so scary when you like really love a celebrity.
Yeah.
So this movie was made for like $0, right? And they actually really lucked out because the team that did the special effects in this movie had actually just finished doing the special effects for Ghostbusters. So they learned how to do all of the special effects for cheap because they had blown all this money on Ghostbusters and they had time to come up with cheap ways to do the special effects. So Chris Sarandon's transformation scenes into the, you know, vampire Jerry took 8 hours of makeup to complete, and he hated it, right? I mean, that's a long time to sit in one place. So he is a pretty legendary stage actor, and when you do theater, you do your own makeup most of the time. So he had a lot of experience doing his own makeup. So he actually ended up completing a lot of the transformation makeup by himself to try and like cut down on the time in the makeup chair. So this movie got really good reviews when it came out. It wasn't a super hit, but it was a modest hit. But it's definitely become a huge cult classic over the years. One of the big reasons that it has become a cult classic, obviously, again, the performances are great. The movie is very, very, very funny. Very well made. And then it has become a huge cult classic in the gay community because Jerry and Billy, which is like his Renfeld like assistant, it was written to be extremely homoerotic, which neither actor knew when they were filming. They, I guess, did not figure it out, but it's pretty clear to me when watching it that that's supposed to be. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie.
I did.
I have
once,
not,
but it was a long time ago.
Okay, so it's it's pretty clear when you're watching it that that's what it's supposed to be. So there was a remake in 2011, which was really, really, really shitty. They kind of tried to make it more like gritty, which I don't know why. I don't know why you would even have to remake it. It's like a perfect movie the first time around. I don't know.
Remake.
I mean, go ahead.
I liked the remake. I thought it was good.
Oh my god, no.
I did
Miranda.
not see it. So
It's so
I thought it was good.
It's not good. Oh no, I just have to disagree with you. I'm sorry.
Well,
I
but I
really
haven't
do.
seen the original,
really...
so I'm not comparing it to the original. I'm just saying as a movie itself, I enjoyed it.
Oh god.
oh boy.
Why do you think it's bad?
Yeah, I thought it was horrible.
We're talking about the same one, right?
I assume so. Who's in it?
I can't remember his name, but he was in Star Trek.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I liked that movie.
I hated it. I thought it was really not good. But that's okay. To each his own. So Tom Holland, someone asked him what he thought of the remake, and he said, "Kudos to them on every level for their professionalism, but they forgot the humor and the heart. They should have called it something other than Fright Night, because it had no more than a passing resemblance to the original. What they did to Jerry Dandridge and Peter Vincent was criminal. Outside of that, it was wonderful." So he hated it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't like it, but again, to each his own. So the last thing I have to say is, so Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars, and he summed up the movie perfectly for me, which he says, "Fright Night is not a distinguished movie, but it has a lot of fun being undistinguished."
I love that.
And that is really the perfect encapsulation of that movie. So it's Miranda, you should really see it. It's hysterical.
Mm-hmm.
It's an all-time classic.
It's just like a great Halloween movie, I think.
Exactly. It's just like a fun movie. Like, you don't have to think when you're watching it. You can just laugh and have a good time, and it really has no deeper meaning, except that it's like a fun movie. And I like that there's thought behind it with really who would you turn to if you found out your neighbor was a vampire? And that he really put some thought into it, which of course you would turn to these like legendary monster hunters, right? Like Vincent Price.
Sure.
Or somebody like, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Svengoolie on TV.
No.
I know who he is, though. I just haven't.
Okay. Yeah. So for people listening who don't really know what a horror host is, it's they basically show like really low budget horror movies, like B movies and like D movies probably too, if that's even such a thing. I mean, just like super low budget horror movies. And then, you know, interspersed will be like the host, who's usually dressed up, you know, like Elvira, like in some kind of costume, and is like making jokes and commentary on the movie, and, you know, kind of like Mystery Science Theater 3000.
At first I was thinking, is there anyone who is listening who is young enough not to know what a horror host is? But then I thought, we really don't. Do we have the equivalent of that nowadays besides Mystery Science Theater?
Well, Svengoolie is still around.
Okay.
He's on MeTV. Because he's based out of Chicago, so...
All right, okay.
We get him here. So that's the thing, is these horror hosts, like, we have Svengoolie here. Or when my mom was growing up in Cleveland, she had Ghoulardi, who was, like, the first... Well, one of the first horror hosts, right? But they're regional. I mean, if you don't live relatively close to Chicago, you're not going to get Svengoolie, right? Elvira, I think, was nationally syndicated, but she was, like, the only one.
Yeah.
But Ghoulardi was Cleveland specific. If you didn't live relatively close to Cleveland, you were not going to get Ghoulardi, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, so if people don't know what horror hosts are, that is what they are. If anyone would like to watch, I think Svengoolie is on Saturday nights on MeTV. And you don't have to have cable, you can just have the antenna.
Aren't those, like, late night things?
Yeah, it doesn't start till, like, 9 or 10 o'clock.
Well, that's not really late. I was thinking, like...
For me, that's really late. I go to bed at, like, 9:30.
I was thinking of, like, there's one we get around here that starts at, like, midnight or 11 on weekends or something. I can't remember what it is.
It might be Svengoolie. I mean, I have not watched it in a while.
I'm never up late enough to watch it.
I know, me either. Me either. But, in any case... That was my pick. It's a really fun movie. Everybody should watch it. It's readily available to purchase. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere.
Well, you can get it on Prime for $2.99, which isn't bad. Also... Oh, I'm sorry. That's the 2011 one. Why don't you bring up the original? That's ridiculous.
It's free on Crackle, if anybody uses Crackle, which I do not. But, you can buy it on Amazon for $3.99 for streaming. And I don't think Happy Death Day is streaming anymore. I know it was for a while.
You can stream it on Amazon for like $3.99. Same with YouTube, Google Play, all that, but you gotta pay.
Okay. But it's not like on Hulu or anything.
No.
But there is a good documentary about the making of Fright Night called You're So Cool, Brewster, The Story of Fright Night, that is streaming on Shudder. So if you have seen Fright Night, the original, I highly recommend the documentary. I forgot about that, but it is very good.
That sounds
very
really
interesting.
Good. So I chose the 2009 horror comedy Drag Me to Hell, directed by Sam Raimi.
I love this movie.
This film has not aged well. Anyway, so plot-wise, this woman named Christine is a loan officer at a bank, and she is vying for the open assistant manager position. Her boss is trying to decide between herself and the new guy, who is like a total misogynist. Really, all of them are, pretty much. There's not a really good person in this movie, I don't think. I don't think there's one good person. Anyway, it's clear that she's working in this very sexist environment where she's expected to get lunch for both her boss and the new guy. They treat her like the coffee person. So then this woman comes in. Her name is Mrs. Ganish, and she has a notice that her house is going to be repossessed if she doesn't make a mortgage payment. And she's looking for an extension on the deadline, but she's already gotten 2 of them. So Christine's boss, of course, tells her it's her call on whether to grant the extension, but that the bank will make a sizable amount if the house is repossessed. So Christine decides to deny the extension, and Mrs. Ganish gets on her knees and begs her, but Christine still denies her. So at the end of her workday, Mrs. Ganish is waiting for Christine in the back of her car. And I guess I didn't mention that the reason that this film did not age well is because Mrs. Ganish is a stereotype of an old Romani woman. And all the bad things that happen in this film are because she puts a curse on Christine. It's really cringy. I didn't notice it when I first saw the film, of course, because it was probably around 2009. But now I'm like, oh my god, okay. That being said, there are some moments in this film that are humorous still. Anyway, the intent is humorous, I suppose. Anyway, Mrs. Ganesh physically assaults Christine, and I just wrote, it is quite comical and grotesque. She basically, like, doesn't have her dentures in and, like, gums her face. It's so gross.
That is really nasty.
And there's a lot of gross out moments in this film. Mm. And so finally Mrs. Ganesh pulls a button off of Christine's jacket, curses it, and puts it back in Christine's hands with the words, "Soon it will be you who comes begging to me." So now she's cursed, and of course she goes to a fortune teller, and he informs her that she's cursed by this demon called the Lamia, who torments people for a few days and then eponymously drags them to hell. So I'll just tell you a couple of the most ridiculous things that happen in this film. One day, Christine goes into the office. She randomly starts squirting blood out of her nose and mouth. Not even like a little trickle. It's like a gushing, like just a stream all over her boss. And he says, "Did I get it in my mouth?" I don't. So at the home wake for Mrs. Ganesh, basically Christine goes to beg to her to take the curse away. She finds out that Mrs. Ganesh is dead and they're having a home funeral. The body falls on Christine and what I can only presume is embalming fluid, which doesn't really make sense in context because are they embalming her at home or what? I don't get it. Anyway, I thought maybe they wouldn't have embalmed her if whatever. Anyway, these are the questions I ask. So the embalming fluid leaks out of Mrs. Ganesh's mouth all over Christine. I don't know.
I love this movie so much.
It's just so absurd. It's so absurd.
But I think that's the
best
point.
part about it.
Like, if it weren't for the tie-in to the disrespect of this culture and the just total inaccuracy, I would be able to laugh at it freely. But right now, I'm in a very weird emotional place because it's like terrible. Anyway, so Christine goes to this exorcist who has met the demon before, and she wants to help Christine in order to get revenge because I think she lost her boy or something to this demon. And there's an adorable white goat that talks at the table. Oh my God. This scene is extremely reminiscent of Evil Dead. Like, if you were looking for the Sam Raimi, it's all over particularly this scene. I'm gonna say skip probably the rest of this episode if you don't want to know the ending, but you're gonna miss out. So it's hard to discuss one of the things I want to talk about without revealing it, but she does get dragged to hell at the end of the movie. So after I watched this time around, I basically was left with two questions. I wanted to know, where did the Lamia originate, and how do I feel about the ending of the film? So I knew the Keats poem called Lamia, so I assumed that it originated in Greek mythology because that's a very Keatsian thing, and which it did. It turns out that Lamia was a Libyan queen who slept with Zeus. That's what I found. I don't know if it was voluntary or not. So Hera slaughtered her children. At which point...
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah. At which point Lamia gouged out her own eyes. I wrote, kind Zeus allowed her to become a monster. A kind of like woman in black sort of entity who sought revenge by killing other people's children. And in mythology, she's often associated with sea monsters, as her name in Latin means large shark, just so you know. Other versions, and the one that Keats based his poem of the same name on, depict her as a beautiful serpent woman. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the poem so you can kind of get an idea of what she looks like to Keats. She seemed at once some penanced lady elf, some demon's mistress, or the demon's self. Upon her crest she wore a wannish fire, sprinkled with stars like Ariadne's tire. Her head was serpent, but bittersweet. She had a woman's mouth with all its pearls complete, and for her eyes, what could such eyes do there but weep and weep that they were born so fair? So that's a little bit of background on that mythological figure that they somehow turned into. I guess I see where it's intersecting with being a demon there, so I thought that was really interesting. And for the second question, I basically wondered if there were any redeeming qualities to the portrayal of Mrs. Ganesh, the Romani woman. And I decided that the answer was no. There's no way around that. Sometimes someone is depicted as a villain, but then when you really look at the text, you can tell that they are the true hero or the anti-hero. That is not at all the case here. However, I did find an article in Bloody Disgusting that reports a few people's views that Christine deserved exactly what she got at the end. That Drag Me to Hell had a happy ending. So, after a closer look and thinking back on it, I'd personally have to agree. But the author of the article asserts that those who believe that Christine deserves her fate only think that they feel that way. Those select few are rationalizing their feelings over losing a character who had not committed any sort of grave sin. But I feel like the author didn't make a big deal out of the one thing that got me, which was her continual lying that it wasn't her fault and that the decision to deny the extension was made by her boss. So I don't know if that's redeemable at all. What do you guys think about the ending?
I don't know. I think that this movie came out in a very specific time period when the economy was going into the shitter, or was actually already in the shitter, and people were sick and tired of big banks and people who work at big banks and taking people's houses when they gave them these house loans that they knew they could never pay. And so I definitely think when I originally saw it, yeah, I really did think she got what she deserved. Because it was kind of like, you had a choice. You could have helped this woman, or you could have furthered your own career for this soulless corporation, and you chose to fulfill your own career for the soulless corporation. So, sucks to be you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I feel. I can't speak to how I felt when I first saw it, because I was probably like 11 or 12 when I first saw it. So, but all I really remember is, like, not being upset at the ending and actually thinking the ending was really awesome. So I have a feeling that if I didn't think she deserved it, I would have hated the ending. So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I do feel like in this movie she's kind of just like a mouthpiece for like banks and big corporations just kind of taking from poor people pretty much. So, yeah, I think she got what she deserved.
See, I can definitely see that, and I make that connection, but the stereotyping gets in the way of that message, I think, because it's mostly saying, oh, but these people will exploit you to no end. Which,
see, I don't think that's what it's saying.
Oh, it sounds like it, because she's already had 2 extensions, and she's obviously this very, she's a grotesque figure. There's nothing redeeming about her. And so the fact that she puts the curse on Christine, it's just like, ugh, I don't know.
I don't know. See, I didn't think that she was a grotesque, unredeemable character. I think, first of all, the reason he chose this is because it's a callback to a lot of, golden age horror movies where you, like The Wolfman, right? Where you had the gypsy woman who knew about the curse, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that's why he chose that. But I don't think she's an unredeemable character. I think she cursed Christine, and Christine deserved it.
Right. Oh, no, I think that's true as well. I feel like what it's trying to say is not that, she's obviously supposed to be an object of disgust to us.
I do agree with that, because I remember one of the things that I remember 3 things from that movie. The goat scene, the ending, and how grossed out I was by, what was her name? Miss Ganesh?
Mrs. Ganesh, I think.
Ganesh. I think she is supposed to be really gross and like you said, grotesque. And I think, I don't know, I think that's just a matter of the times, kind of problem, I mean, it's problematic, obviously, but I think it's more so just a matter of the times. And I don't know if it's, because I think you said earlier that you thought that she was, like, supposed to show how, like, those people will exploit corporations.
No, those people will exploit other people to no end. Like, if you run into a Romani person, they will exploit you to no end.
Oh,
they will continue to take things from you.
See, I didn't see it
not
that
how
way.
I read it. Yeah.
I saw it as him using, like, the whole gypsy thing as, like, oh, she's gonna put a curse on you, like, just to make her quote-unquote scarier, I guess. You know?
Yeah, I didn't read it as... Because, again, I mean, I think with the climate that this movie came out in, the idea of people going to the bank and begging for second, third, and fourth extensions was realistic.
I think the intention was that, but for me, it makes me read it as a mixed message there. Yeah. Because of the stereotyping. I guess that's what I meant to say.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
It just depends how much the audience would understand about Romani people and how familiar they would be with this idea that they'll exploit you, because I feel like a lot of people don't know that.
I don't think they know that, but if you think back on everything you've heard about quote-unquote gypsies in your life and like just the way they're portrayed in popular media, there's an underlying assumption there, I think. They're always those characters you can't trust. Like, the thieves and the people who are practicing witchcraft, and you just never know what they're gonna do to you. Them in their mysterious ways, and they're always begging, and, all that stuff. So it's like, I don't know. Except... No, I don't want to say that. Never mind. I was going to say, like, Esmeralda was a good character, and she was portrayed, I thought, in a good way, but I don't know how much that goes into stereotype because I am not Romani, so.
It's been a long time since I've read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, so I really couldn't tell you.
I was talking about the movie.
Oh, the Disney movie.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at QOTD Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/QOTD Podcast, Tumblr at queensofthedamnpodcast.tumblr.com, and YouTube at Queens of the Damn Podcast.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and TuneIn Radio. You can also follow us on our blog, queensofthedamnpodcast.wordpress.com, to find bonus content and extra information on our episodes.
If you would like to donate to our show, you can find us at patreon.com/QOTD podcast, where you can receive special perks as a listener for becoming a monthly patron. If you would like to make a one-time donation, you can send it to QOTDpodcast@gmail.com on PayPal. We'll see you next week.